I was born and raised in Texas, a place where the sky feels endless and the land stretches farther than the eye can see. All my life, I believed that family was the strongest bond of all, stronger than time, distance, or hardship. When I was a young mother, holding my babies in my arms, I thought that love would always flow between us in the most natural way. I whispered, "I love you," to them when they were small, kissed their little foreheads, and tucked them in with prayers at night. I thought those words, that warmth, would grow with them and bloom as they did. But as the years went by, I noticed something missing, something small at first, but heavier as time passed. They never said those words back to me. My children never said, "I love you." Maybe it sounds simple, but for a mother's heart, it is everything. In the beginning, I told myself it didn't matter. After all, children show love in different ways, don't they? A smile, a hug, or just the way they look at you can mean just as much as words. I convinced myself of that when they were little. When my son would bring me a dandelion from the yard, I thought, that is love. When my daughter would slip her small hand into mine as we walked, I thought, that is love too. And I was satisfied, believing the words would come when they grew older. But childhood turned to teenage years, and teenage years turned into adulthood, and still those words never came. Not on birthdays, not on Christmas mornings, not on Mother's Day. They would give me cards that said thank you or best mom, but never I love you. Even when they left home, even when they called me on the phone, those words stayed silent as though they had never been part of their language. I tried to understand. Maybe it was just how they were raised, though I couldn't remember ever teaching them to hold love inside. I said it often, freely, like the air we breathe. "I love you, sweetie," I'd say before they left for school. "I love you, honey," I'd say before hanging up the phone. And every time I waited for the echo, for their voices to carry it back to me. But the line would go quiet, or they'd change the subject, or they'd just say, "Okay, Mom." That silence became heavier than any words. I carried it in my chest like a stone. I would sit at night, staring at the stars above Texas, wondering what I had done wrong. Did I smother them with too much affection? Did I fail to teach them that saying "I love you" was not weakness but strength? Or maybe they simply didn't feel it the way I did. That thought would break me most of all. A mother lives for love, you see. We sacrifice, we give, we endure, all because of love. Without it, what meaning is there? And yet, I tried to keep my heart soft. I kept telling them I loved them, even when it hurt not to hear it back. I thought maybe one day, one moment, one special occasion, they would surprise me with it, and all those years of waiting would melt away. But that day never came. Instead, I grew older. My hair turned gray, my hands wrinkled, and the children I once held grew taller, stronger, with families of their own. And still, they never said it. Sometimes I'd watch them with their own children, hear them say, "I love you," so easily to their little ones, and my heart would ache. They knew how to say it. They just didn't say it to me. And that, my dear, is a hurt a mother never truly recovers from. When I think back on it, I sometimes wonder if the way I was raised shaped all of this. In my own childhood, love was not something spoken out loud very often. My parents were hard-working Texans, tough as the dry soil and stubborn as the mesquite trees. They loved us, I know they did, but the words were rare, like rain in August. My mama would show love in the meals she cooked, in the way she darned socks and made sure we never went to bed hungry. My daddy showed it by working sunup to sundown, bringing home every cent he could so we could have a roof over our heads. But "I love you," those words almost never crossed their lips. And maybe, just maybe, I carried that silence with me longer than I realized. When I became a mother, I swore I'd do differently. I wanted my children to hear the words that my heart had longed for when I was small. So I said it often. I said it loud. I whispered it into their ears when they were babies, sang it into lullabies, wrote it on little notes in their lunch boxes. I wanted them to grow up knowing that love was not only shown but spoken, that could fill a room, warm a heart, and heal a wound. But maybe because I gave it so freely, they didn't feel the need to say it back. Maybe they thought my love was endless, so endless that it did not need reflection. I do not know. All I know is that the silence grew louder as the years passed. I remember one evening so clearly. It was my birthday. The house was filled with laughter, my children and their children gathered around. The smell of barbecue in the air, and the warm Texas sun setting behind the fields. They brought me gifts, a new quilt, a necklace, even a cake with candles. Everyone sang happy birthday, clapped, and smiled. But when it was all done, when the plates were cleared and the house quieted, I realized not one of my children had said, "I love you." Not one. They hugged me, they kissed my cheek, but those 3 words never came. That night, lying in bed, I cried softly into my pillow. Not because of the gifts, they were beautiful, or the gathering, it was sweet, but because the one gift I longed for most, the one thing my heart needed most, was missing again. Over time, I grew more afraid to admit how deeply it hurt me. I didn't want to sound ungrateful. My children were good children. They worked hard, they never got into trouble, they built lives of their own, and they never truly abandoned me. I was proud of them, proud of the people they had become. But pride and hurt can live together, you know. You can love someone fiercely and still ache for the smallest thing they withhold. So I kept the hurt to myself, burying it deeper every year, while still giving love freely. I said it at the end of every phone call, at the end of every visit. I love you. And when the silence came in return, I smiled as if it didn't matter. But inside, I felt a little piece of myself chip away. Sometimes late at night, I would whisper to the empty room, "Why can't they just say it? Why can't they see how much I need it?" And then I would scold myself for being foolish. Words aren't everything, I told myself. Look at their actions. They come to see you, they bring the grandkids, they help when you're sick. Isn't that love? Isn't that enough? But deep down I knew it wasn't, because words matter. Words have power. Words linger in the heart long after the moment has passed. A hug lasts a second, a gift lasts a season, but "I love you," those words last a lifetime. Without them, a mother can feel invisible, even in the middle of her own family. I started to notice how often I said it and how quickly they avoided answering. Sometimes they'd laugh it off. Sometimes they'd just say, "Okay, Mom." Sometimes they'd hang up before I could even finish. And every time, I'd sit in silence afterward, holding the phone in my hand, staring at it as though it had swallowed the words I longed to hear. As the years passed, I learned to live with it, but never to stop wishing. A mother's heart never stops wishing, you see. No matter how old the children get, no matter how gray the hair grows, no matter how many candles are on the cake, the wish remains the same, to be loved out loud. To hear those 3 words. To know, without a doubt, that the love you poured out like water has flowed back to you at least once in return. And yet, in my home, in my family, those words stayed locked away, as though my children had built walls around their hearts that even I could not climb. There were times when I almost gathered the courage to ask them outright, to look into their eyes and say, "Why don't you ever tell me you love me?" But each time, the words stuck in my throat. I worried that if I asked, it would sound like begging or worse, that it might embarrass them and push them further away. A mother should not have to ask for love. I told myself it should flow freely, the same way it flows out of her heart. And so I stayed quiet, swallowing my questions and carrying on with life as best I could. Sometimes I would overhear my children speaking to their spouses or their own children. I would hear the words come so easily then. I love you, sweetheart. I love you, baby. Good night. I love you. They said it without hesitation, without thought, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. And every time, a part of me was relieved that they at least knew how to say it, that they had not been robbed of the ability to put love into words. But another part of me ached deeply, because it showed me that they had simply chosen not to say it to me. That realization hurt in a way that is difficult to describe. It was like being at a feast and still starving, like standing under a sky full of rain clouds and never feeling a drop. I began to think maybe I had been too soft with them, too forgiving, too gentle, and that perhaps they had taken my love for granted. Maybe they believed I would always be there, always loving them, no matter what, so why bother saying it aloud? They knew my heart was theirs, so perhaps they didn't feel the need to reassure me. But what they didn't understand was that even a mother needs reassurance. Even a mother needs to hear those words once in a while. My own mother, for all her toughness, once said to me in her old age, "Child, I don't need much, but sometimes I just want someone to tell me I matter." I didn't fully understand it then, but now I do. As I grew older, I felt that same yearning, that same quiet ache. And though I tried to fill my days with joy, tending my garden, baking pies, playing with my grandkids, there was always a shadow at the edge of my heart. It followed me, even in laughter, reminding me of what was missing. I will never forget one particular day. I had fallen ill with the flu, and my body was weak, my fever high. My children came to visit, bringing soup and medicine. They fussed over me, making sure I was comfortable. They told me to rest, to take care, to let them handle things around the house. Their concern touched me, and for a moment I thought, maybe today is the day. Maybe they will finally say it. As they were leaving, I gathered my strength and whispered, "I love you." My voice cracked, tired and frail, but I meant it with all my soul. They smiled, nodded, and said, "Okay, Mom, we'll see you soon." The door closed, and once again the silence was my answer. I laid back in my bed and cried, not from the fever, not from the sickness, but from the emptiness that filled me more than the illness ever could. That was when I began to realize something important. Maybe the words would never come. Maybe I would grow old and leave this earth without ever hearing my children say, "I love you." And I had to find a way to live with that. But how does a mother live with that? How does she accept the silence of her own children? I tried to comfort myself by looking at their actions. They did care for me. They did visit me. They did help when I was in need. Actions speak louder than words, people say. But I will tell you, as someone who has lived a long life, actions may speak, but words echo. And sometimes you need the echo more than the action. I began to dream about it at night. In my dreams, my children would embrace me and finally say the words I longed to hear. I would wake up smiling, feeling warm for a moment, only to be struck again by the silence of the day. Still, I held on to hope, even if only a thread of it, because a mother's hope never dies. Even when the years stack high like bales of hay in a Texas barn, even when disappointment grows thick as dust on the porch, hope still flickers. And I told myself that if my children never gave me the gift of those words, perhaps God Himself would make up the difference, filling my heart with the love I longed for. That thought carried me through many lonely nights, when the only sound was the wind brushing against the windows and the crickets outside. I prayed that one day, somehow, my children would understand what their silence had done to me, and that before I left this world, I might hear those words just once. The older I grew, the more I noticed how time changes everything. When you are young, you think you have forever. You think there will always be another holiday, another birthday, another chance to say the words left unsaid. But as the years pass, the truth becomes clearer. Time is not endless. Time is a thief, taking away little pieces of life when you are not looking. And I began to feel that thief more each year. My body grew weaker, my steps slower, my mind filled with more memories than plans. And with every passing season, my hope that my children would one day say, "I love you," seemed to shrink. Yet still I kept waiting. Waiting is what mothers do best. We wait for our babies to be born. We wait for them to take their first steps. We wait for them to come home from school. We wait for them to return safely from their journeys into the world. And for me, I waited for words. Just 3 simple words. My heart longed for them the way the Texas earth longs for rain after a dry summer. I remember one Thanksgiving. The whole family gathered around the table. There was turkey, stuffing, pies lined up on the counter. Laughter filled the room, and for a while, I felt the warmth of belonging. After dinner, as everyone settled in the living room, I sat back and watched my children with their children. I saw the tenderness in their voices when they spoke to their little ones, the way they hugged them and kissed their cheeks. And when the grandkids said, "I love you, Mommy," or "I love you, Daddy," my children answered right back, "I love you too." The words rolled off their tongues like music, and I sat there in silence, my smile hiding the ache inside. It wasn't jealousy I felt, it was longing. I didn't begrudge my grandchildren their love, not for a second. But it reminded me, once again, that those words had never been mine to receive. After everyone went home that night, I sat in my chair and prayed. I told the Lord that I wasn't asking for riches or long years. I wasn't asking for anything grand. All I wanted was for my children to tell me they loved me before my time was over. I thought if I asked him enough, if I prayed hard enough, maybe he would soften their hearts. Maybe he would make them see how much it meant to me. Days turned into months, and months into years. My birthdays came and went, Christmases, Easters, all filled with joy on the outside, but with a quiet emptiness on the inside. I never stopped saying it to them, though. Every time I spoke to them, whether in person or on the phone, I made sure to end with, "I love you." Sometimes I felt like a broken record, repeating myself into the void. But I couldn't let go of the hope that one day the words would finally come back to me. And then there was the day I ended up in the hospital. It was nothing too serious, but at my age, every hospital visit feels heavier than it should. My children came to see me, bringing flowers, holding my hand, telling me to rest. Their presence comforted me, but even then, when the moment seemed so fragile, so filled with the weight of life and death, the words still did not come. As they left the room, I whispered once more, "I love you." And just as always, the answer was silence. That night, lying in the hospital bed with machines beeping softly around me, I felt the truth hit me harder than ever before. I might never hear those words. I might leave this earth without the one thing I had longed for most. The thought broke me, yet at the same time, it forced me to find strength in a new way. I realized I had to make peace with it. I could not change my children. I could not force them to say what they would not say. All I could do was keep loving them, the way I always had, without expectation, without condition. Love, I reminded myself, is not about what we receive. It is about what we give. And if my life had been spent pouring love into my children, even if it never came back in words, then that was still a life worth living. Still, The ache never fully went away. It was there in the quiet moments when I sat on the porch watching the Texas sun sink into the horizon. It was there when I tucked myself into bed at night, whispering into the darkness, "I love you," as though saying it aloud might ease the loneliness in my heart. And though I tried to carry it with grace, there were nights when the tears fell anyway, soft and silent, soaking my pillow as I prayed for what seemed like the smallest, simplest thing, a mother's wish to be loved out loud. Sometimes I sit and wonder if my children even realize what their silence has done to me. Maybe in their minds, they believe it doesn't matter, that I know they love me without needing to hear the words. Maybe they think their visits, their calls, their help with chores or errands are enough. And in a way, they are. I have never doubted that my children care for me. I have never believed they hated me or wished me harm. No, it is not hate that hurts. It is indifference, the lack of those 3 little words that would have cost them nothing to say, but would have meant everything to me. It is a strange kind of pain, to feel both loved and unloved at the same time, to see the proof of love in actions, but to feel the emptiness in silence. It is like being surrounded by light, but still feeling the chill of the shadows. And I cannot help but think about all the years I spent raising them, how many times I held them when they cried, how many nights I stayed awake while they slept, just to make sure they were safe. I think about how my whole heart beat for them, how everything I did in life was for them. And I wonder, was it really too much to hope that one day they would look at me and say, "I love you, Mom"? Sometimes I think they do not realize how quickly life moves, how fragile it is, how one day can change everything. I remember when they were small and scraped their knees on the driveway, I would kiss the wound and tell them everything would be all right. I remember when they had nightmares, I would pull them close and whisper, "Mama loves you, Mama's here." I thought those words would sink into their bones, that they would never forget them, that they would one day return them to me. But the truth is, children grow up and forget more than we ever expect. They forget the hours we sat up with them when they were sick, the meals we skipped so they could eat, the sacrifices that kept them warm and safe. They forget the words we gave so freely, words that meant the world to us. I try not to blame them, because maybe it is not forgetting at all. Maybe it is just that they do not know how much it means to a mother to hear those words spoken aloud. Maybe they think love is obvious, that it does not need to be said, but they are wrong. Love may be felt, but it also needs to be heard. It needs to live in the air, not just in the heart. Without words, love is like music trapped inside an instrument. It exists, but it is never truly heard. The years keep teaching me this, in ways both gentle and cruel. When I lost a dear friend, a woman I had known since childhood, I remembered the last time we spoke. She had hugged me tight and said, "I love you, old friend." Those were the last words she ever spoke to me, and do you know what? They gave me comfort after she was gone. Even in her absence, those words lived on in my memory, warming me when the grief was heavy. And it struck me then how much I longed for that same comfort for my own children, how much I feared leaving this world without ever hearing them say it. For what would I carry with me? Only silence. Sometimes I think about writing them a letter, telling them exactly how I feel, pouring my heart onto the page so they will finally understand. But each time I imagine it, I hesitate. What if they think I am being dramatic or needy or foolish? What if they dismiss my words as nothing more than the ramblings of an old woman? That thought frightens me more than the silence itself. Because once spoken, truth cannot be taken back. And so I remain quiet, holding it all inside, loving them in every way I can, even as I ache for what I cannot have. There are days when I remind myself of the blessings I do have. I am not alone. My children still come around, my grandchildren bring joy, and I live in a home filled with memories. Many mothers have less than this. Some are forgotten entirely, left alone in nursing homes with no visitors. I am luckier than that, I tell myself. And yet, the heart does not measure love in comparisons. The heart only knows what it needs, and mine has always needed those words. I think about it most when I am lying down at night, when the house is still, when the sounds of the world are far away. I stare at the ceiling and imagine their voices, just once, saying it. I love you, Mom. I imagine how it would heal me, how it would make all the years of waiting worth it. And then the silence returns, and I whisper it to myself, because sometimes that is the only way to keep hope alive. There came a time when I truly began to feel the weight of years pressing on me. My body slowed down, my hands ached with the cold, and the mirror showed me a face lined with every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every prayer whispered for my children. I knew I was no longer the strong mother who once carried them on her hip or stayed up all night rocking them through fevers. I was an old woman now, and life was shorter ahead of me than behind. That knowledge made the silence even heavier. I told myself, if not now, then when? If my children will not say, I love you while I am here, will they only say it after I am gone? Will those words come too late, spoken over my grave when I can no longer hear them? That thought haunted me more than anything. I imagined them standing together at my funeral, perhaps even whispering, "We loved her," as though it were easier to say when I was no longer here. And I asked myself, why must a mother's heart wait until it is too late? Why could they not give me the comfort of those words while I still had breath in my lungs? I never stopped loving them, of course. Even as the ache grew deeper, my love for them did not waver. Love is stubborn like that. It endures in silence. It endures in disappointment. It endures in heartbreak. A mother's love is not a trade, not something given only if it is returned. It is a river that flows endlessly, even if no one drinks from it. Still, I longed for a cup from that river to flow back into me just once. One day, I found myself sitting with my eldest grandchild, a sweet young girl with a kind soul. We were baking cookies together, and out of nowhere she said, "Grandma, I love you." My heart nearly burst. The tears came before I could stop them, and I hugged her tightly, almost too tightly. In that moment, I realized that though my children had never said the words, at least my grandchildren did. At least they knew how to say it, and they said it freely. I clung to that comfort, letting it heal me in places my children never could. But it also made me wonder, did my children withhold it from me on purpose? Did they somehow believe that showing love made them weak? Or was it pride? I will never know. What I do know is that I did not want to leave this world with bitterness in my heart. I wanted peace. So I decided to give them even more love, not less. I made it my mission to remind them, every time I saw them, every time I spoke to them, that I loved them. I told them in cards, in phone calls, in hugs and goodbyes. And though the silence came back, I did not let it harden me. I told myself that maybe, just maybe, my words would plant seeds in their hearts, and someday they would bloom, even if it happened after I was gone. Sometimes I would talk to God about it in my prayers. I would say, "Lord, if I cannot hear those words from them on this earth, please let them know in their hearts that I love them with all I had." I prayed that even in their silence, my children felt my love so strongly that they would carry it forever. And strangely enough, those prayers gave me peace. It was as if God whispered back to me, "They may not say it, but they know." And knowing is its own kind of love. That thought kept me going. There were still nights when I cried, still moments when I longed to hear those 3 words, but I also learned to let go a little. I learned that love is not always given the way we want it, but it can still be real. My children may never have spoken the words, but I began to see their love in other ways. In the way my son fixed my porch steps without being asked. In the way my daughter called to check if I needed groceries. In the way they brought their families to me, keeping me part of their lives. Maybe those actions were their "I love you," even if unspoken. It wasn't the love I had prayed for, but it was love nonetheless. And though my heart still yearned for the words, I began to find peace in the silence. Because in the end, what mattered most was that I loved them. I loved them more than my own breath, more than my own life, and nothing, not even silence, could take that away. As I sit here now, older and slower, I realize that life is not about getting everything you wish for. It is about learning to find meaning in what you have been given. I spent many years waiting for my children to tell me they loved me, and though those words never came, I have learned something important. Love is not always spoken. Sometimes it is in the way my son brings me a cup of coffee just the way I like it, without me asking. Sometimes it is in the way my daughter makes sure I never spend Christmas alone, even if it means rearranging her whole family's plans. Sometimes it is in the way they look at me when they think I am not watching, their eyes soft, their smiles tender. Those are their I love yous, though they may never say the words aloud. And while I still wish I could hear them, I no longer let the silence break me. Instead, I choose to let it teach me. I have learned that words are powerful, but so is patience. I have learned that silence can hurt, but it can also shape you into someone stronger, someone who understands that love wears many disguises. And most of all, I have learned that my worth as a mother was never in the words I received, but in the love I gave. My children may never have said, "I love you," but they carried my love with them all the same. It is in the way they raise their own children, in the kindness they show others, in the lives they are building, that is my love passed down, living on in them whether they admit it or not. And now, when my grandchildren run into my arms and shout, "I love you, Grandma," I take it as God's way of giving me back what I longed for. He knew my heart ached, so He filled it through the next generation. I see in their little faces the love that has always flowed through our family, and I know that my words were not wasted. I may not have heard them from my children, but I planted them deeply enough that my grandchildren can now say them without hesitation. That, to me, is proof that love never disappears. It may take time, it may take years, it may even skip a step, but it finds its way back in the end. So I choose to be grateful. Grateful that I lived long enough to see my children grow, to meet my grandchildren, to watch love bloom in its own way, even if not the way I dreamed. Grateful that I never stopped saying, "I love you," because even if those words echoed in silence, they were never wasted. They were seeds, and seeds always grow, even if we don't see it right away. If I could leave one message behind for others, it would be this: never hold back your love. Say it, show it, give it freely. Do not wait for it to be returned, because love is never truly lost, even if it is not spoken back. It becomes part of the world, part of the people you touch, and it will find its way back to you. Maybe not in the way you expect, but in the way you need. My true story from Texas is not just about the silence of my children. It is about the endurance of a mother's love, a love that kept giving, even when it was not returned in words, a love that refused to harden, refused to grow bitter, refused to stop. And that, I believe, is the truest kind of love there is. I still whisper it every time I see my children, every time I hang up the phone. every time I close my eyes at night. I love you. And though they never say it back, I no longer feel empty. Because I know in my heart, in the way they live, in the way they care, that my love has not been in vain. And when I leave this world, I will go knowing that I loved fully, and that is more than enough.